Hey everyone, welcome to the Emissaries of the Gospel podcast. I am Jeremy Brown and I'm your host. And if you would, please make sure you click like and subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, and click the notification bell to receive all notifications. It helps the channel. If you enjoy our content, please share with others. Now, what we're talking about today, this is going to be a real quick video. This is going to be about Christian sentimentalism and how that throws many Christians off course, right? And the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because I see so many people who get caught up in this idea of what seems nice. You know, we have our brother Vodi Bakum, who famously says the 11th commandment is thou shalt be nice, right? We have so many people who are caught up in this, what I would say is a false sense of sympathy. There's the whole sympathy empathy debate. I don't want to get into that today, but that's also applicable, where essentially we let this idea of sentimentality, this raw emotionalism, this idea of even a false sense of mercy or pity is going to cause us to um, embrace an unbiblical response to another person. You know, usually as a result of their sin. And you know, it could be a lifestyle sin, it could be a crime that they've committed or whatever, but it causes us to so we feel sorry for them, and so then we decide, well, I can enable that. We don't actually say the words enable that to ourselves, obviously. You know, nobody is thinking that through their head logically. I would have to assume that, but they are saying, well, you know, maybe I can let them off the hook. Or they say, well, you know, maybe they have a chance to accept the gospel. Or, well, you know, if they're punished, maybe it'll ruin our relationship. Or maybe they'll just be angry with God. And none of those things are essentially true. And even if they were, it wouldn't matter, because God is sovereign over all those things. And, you know, it's not our methodology that we can give credit to, right? It's the Lord's sovereignty. And so we need to make sure that we are in line with His Scripture, right? The Scripture says that His Word is a light unto our path, right? It's a light for our path, a lamp unto our feet. The Scripture tells us to be sober-minded so many times. And some passages that I wanted to go to today, just to show that even in what would be considered, you know, extreme examples, we're not to allow our sense of sentimentality to overtake our sense of righteousness, justice, duty, responsibility, those kind of things, right? And so if God has given us a command, if He has entrusted a specific duty to us, we have to carry that out without any sense of compromising for the sake of you know, a relationship, or to have a feel good because maybe we were merciful to that person. And I'm using the air quotes a lot because there is a proper time and a place for mercy, right? And there's a proper time and place for grace. But we need to be about getting our categories straight as Christians. And so we want to embrace a worldview. You know, part of the purpose of Emissaries of the Gospel is we push back the darkness and we fight against the darkness wherever it is thriving. And one thing that dark forces have been somewhat successful at is, um, you know, getting the church to think emotionally and out of sentiment, instead of thinking out of uh, duty and responsibility, instead of out of obligation, instead of out of command and principle, right? And so at that point, then anything goes, right? So I said this would be a short video, and it will be. So I'm going to get right into it. Deuteronomy 7:16 It says, "And you shall consume all the peoples that the Lord your God will give over to you. Your eye shall not pity them, neither shall you serve their gods, for that would be a snare to you." So, God is telling them they're going to consume all these people. God's going to just give over these people to them. He's going to give them triumph over these people. And when they're doing so, their eye is not to pity them, right? When God says his judgment is to be carried out, it's to be carried out rather, without a sense of sentimentality, but with a sense of duty, with a sense of purpose. And also in Deuteronomy 13, 6 through 8, is talking about, if your brother or your son or your daughter or even your wife or your friend entices you secretly and is trying to get you to go after and serve other gods, which neither you nor your fathers have known, but rather the gods of the people around you, whether near or far off from you. It's saying that you shall not listen to them, nor shall your eye pity them, or shall you spare them, nor shall you conceal them. So this is talking about the judgment that's going to happen, right? And so it's over and over. You're not going to spare them. You're not going to pity them. You're not going to conceal them. You're not going to hide them or whatever, right? But you are to carry out God's judgment. That is a wicked thing. And one thing I'll add here, although obviously the primary meaning of these verses right here is someone who is enticing you to go off and worship another god and commit idolatry, that God very clearly says in the book of Deuteronomy 28:14 that one of the ways that a friend or brother can entice you to go off and serve another god, just as the language says in Deuteronomy 13 here, one of those ways is to turn from the right or the left from God's law, right? His commandments that he has given us. We don't turn from the right, to the right rather from them, or to the left from them. So we need to follow God's laws as he has given them to us. We need to follow his commandments as he's given them to us. We need to honor the principles that God has set down for us, and we don't veer from them. We seek to categorically understand them and apply them, right? So there's room for humility. We can we can learn, we can be corrected, but we're not going to let the sentimentality of the world and their logic and their philosophy get us to turn aside from serving the living God and turn after and serve their gods with their sentiments, right? We go with duty and with purpose after what God has established. Now, the final passage that I'm going to bring up to you is Deuteronomy 19, verses 15 through 21. And this is talking about a malicious witness. Earlier in the passage is talking about a man who went out and killed somebody. And God again says, your eye shall not pity them, right? You don't spare them. And here you have a false witness or a malicious witness, right? And this is after the judges inquired diligently. So when you determine if someone's a false witness or a malicious witness, you're not going to just say, oh, well, you didn't prove someone was guilty, so you're automatically a false witness. No. They go and question you and seek to determine, was this knowing? Was this motivated out of some type of malice or cruelty or hate? And God has said, whatever you meant to do to your brother, right, that's going to happen to you, and you shall purge the evil from your midst. So this is saying that there are certain contexts where even, killing someone, the civil magistrate executing justice by the death penalty, right? We're not to pity them. We're not to take it lightly and say, oh, well, it was just a little slander, just a little false witness, just a little malicious witness over here. You don't have to go, as far as executing them, right? And you try to minimize it. And there's all the sentimentality that comes in, right? Oh, well, a lot of times it happens because the person's a woman, right? We'll say, oh, well, this is one of our daughters, or this person reminds me of my daughter or my sister or my mother. And so, I can't do that. God doesn't create that exception at all in his word. That is completely unacceptable in his word, right? Or it could be that, the guy who is acting with malice, maybe he's poor, right? Or maybe he belongs to a certain people group, or whatever it is. Maybe he, shares the same profession of faith as you, right? But if he's showing that it's false and he's doing something that God has condemned, right? We can't sit there and say, oh well, I just really like this guy, and so I'm going to ignore what God says and what He's established, and I'm going to instead enable my brother. You can't do that, right? So in this idea, sentimentality would be the enemy, and just like that, there's so many places in the church right now where sentimentality is the enemy. Where, I don't want to beat on this because I did a video, 20 something minute video on the Alistair Begg controversy. And certainly he's not the first, and certainly he's not the worst in terms of offenders in that regard. But there's a sense where sentimentality was driving him, right? So we see it has many effects. It's not just something that comes into play when, the death penalty is involved. It's just, how do we deal with brothers and sisters when they're in the wrong? There's a sense where, God commands us there are gentle ways that we correct, right? There's ways that we want to seek to restore them if they're truly a brother or sister in the faith. There's a way that we talk to different people and whatnot. But at the end of the day, we can't have a sentimentality that causes us to say, my eye is pitying you, right? And so I'm just going to not do what God has commanded because I feel more for you in how much I like you or how much I relate to you or how much, your people group I have pity on, right? And so I'm just going to give you a pass. It can't work like that. We see this in other things too, and I hate to say it, but again, like a lot of times it comes up with issues that are relating to women, right? If a woman falsely, accuses her husband of beating her, right, or some type of abuse, where she says, "I can't be there," or whatever. I'm afraid of what he might do, and I'm saying that, and I'm saying it a little lightly, right? I recognize that real situations happen and we have to take them extremely seriously and deal with them that way. But in the case of a false or malicious accusation, in a case where you have a woman that's maybe maximizing his sin and exaggerating it for the purpose of kind of getting people sympathetic to her side of things and her plight. She wants people to see things her way and not really look at them objectively. If you have that type of woman or a woman who's doing that type of thing in your midst, you can't sit there and say, oh, well, she's got to feel something, there's a reason why she feels this. Well, it's probably true that there's sin on both sides, but, is it abuse? Is he really beating her? Does she have a legitimate reason to feel fearful? And I can't talk today. You have to ask those questions, right? And if the case is that she is being a malicious witness, right, then you would have church discipline that's in order, right? Let's say you have a man and he's served your church faithfully. Maybe he's been a deacon, or he's one of the best tithers in church, or he's at every event and every service, or whatever the case may be, right? But he's caught up in some egregious sin. He's cheating on his wife. Are you going to say, well, we're just going to leave you a warning? Well, you're going to correct your brother. You're going to rebuke your brother. You're going to tell him to turn away from his sin, but you can't withhold discipline if it comes to that. If you say, oh, well, I'm just going to let him, instead of bringing him up for church discipline and going through that process, I'm just going to ignore it and say, we'll dismiss his membership and he can go to the church down the street and I won't say much of anything to them. You can't do that. You cannot do that. That is absolutely wrong. Even if the person, leaves your congregation, you have to go through the process, right? You can't transfer their membership or just dismiss them. You have to go through the process. There's 100 other applications. The purpose of this video is not to try to cover every other application that you could have for this. The idea is just to get you thinking about when you assess a situation and when you assess your like your natural urges or inclinations in that situation, or when you're even seeing other people and how they're responding. Is it out of a sense of sentimentality? Right? Is there maybe like a little emotional, and it doesn't have to be someone actively emotionally manipulating them. It's just does the situation and our current context and those kind of things that the popular narrative around a subject, does that create a sense of emotional manipulation where maybe it's tempting you to pity something that you should not pity, right? So I'm going to do more content on this kind of subject in the future, maybe go a little more in depth, but I just wanted to get you thinking, kind of pique your interest on the subject a little bit, and help us to establish good categories. That's it for today. Please remember to hit like and subscribe and share this with your friends if you enjoyed this content. Have a good day.